Good. Welcome to this podcast with Juan Carlos Parada. JC, welcome.
Very much, Fred. It's a pleasure to be here with you again.
So, JC, you're the global head of customer operations at Unilever. Why don't we start by getting a quick introduction on your side? Talk a little bit about your career at Unilever and what are the big facts that you want to share with us about the company as well.
We're happy to do that. I've spent a long career of more than 30 years in different roles in the end-to-end supply chain. It's my passion. And I'm with Unilever for the last 11 years. I started in Latin America with different roles, so leading the region. I did also global procurement. And more recently, I've been leading 3 years ago, I was the head of Europe. And since last year that we embarked in a major transformation of Unilever, became the global head of customer operations. That basically, this is the backbone, the operational backbone of the company. And I run all the operations that are customer facing, from sales operations all the way to collections, including everything that happens in between.
Excellent. That's an amazing career. Congratulations. And today we're talking a little bit more about decision intelligence. And Unilever was one of the early adopter, and I would say almost pioneer with decision intelligence. We started working together a few years back. And of course, things are the snowball is building up right now, which is very exciting. But talk a bit about how the decision-making environment has evolved over the past few years, and where does decision intelligence fits into your strategic goals today?
Sure. The first thing that we need to recognize is that the industry has evolved, and basically to cope with much more demanding consumer preferences, shortening of planning cycles, increased competition, not to mention about disruptions that we have been getting used to in the last few years. So basically, all the companies have been facing the need of improving the decision-making process. Unilever is not the exception. And last year, we responded to this changing environment with a major organizational change to basically is making us simpler, faster, and more agile. Part of this transformation created the customer operations organization that now I'm leading, and which is, as I said before, the operational backbone of the company and the engine to digitize our value chain. In this entire landscape, and with the intention to become more agile and more tech-driven, decision intelligence fits definitively as a strategic component in my overall master plan, in the master plan of the company, and is part of the broader ecosystem in terms of data and analytics that we have in the company. We are integrating the existing system and all the data sources from the different functions. And as I mentioned carefully, I mentioned value chain, which is an expansion in my language of the traditional value chain, adding elements of finance, IT, sales, operations, and marketing to basically create this function. And the objective of these data sources is to integrate everything together. And you can imagine the huge amount of decisions and complexity that is involved in that. So a data-driven approach and powered by decision intelligence has been key for us to power this, what we call industry first model that is customer-centric, and again, only can be enabled by the amount of complexity and decisions by decision intelligence. That's the central role that we see in decision intelligence, Fred.
I think that's fascinating because one of the first companies that I know of that literally reorganized itself in order to enable that digital change. And I think you have a way to frame the conversation that I really like. You're talking about not thinking digital, not acting digital, but actually being digital and bring digital in the way decisions are made and executed every day. And I think this is a very, very fascinating way of thinking about it, right? So,
correct.
The next,
and I think, Fred, if I may, I think I like your phrase. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but again, I think we talked a lot about what you said of doing digital and being digital, and this is the key mindset change. And I think in many places in the company and many places in the industry, I see a lot of examples of doing digital. But that transition of being digital is what basically creates the edge and is what gives decision intelligence a lot of meaning, a different meaning versus when we do digital. And that transition is key, it's a critical mindset change.
Yeah, I think, this is why it's so fascinating. You're talking about leveraging. We like to talk at Aera about going from people doing the work supported by machines, digital machines, to machines, digital machines, doing the work guided by people. And that's really where now your folks are working with the technology to help drive the scale and the agility, as well as the accuracy of decision making. So let's talk about this, because you've embarked into a large program over the years, starting small, growing. How did you drive user adoption? You talk about being digital, you talk about people working with those machines. So how did you drive the adoption from the associates around the company for decision intelligence, and how are you continuing to grow and scale its use today?
No, excellent question. And I think you're hitting on the secret sauce, in my opinion. I think this is why I'm particularly passionate about, because in the end, what I've been learning in this process, Fred, is that decision intelligence, in my experience, really is a people-first process. And that's why your question is so relevant. I believe that, first of all, I think we need to secure that we have the support of senior leadership to drive adoption. It needs to be a conscious decision, and it connects to our previous conversation of doing digital versus being digital, okay? And then that's why senior leadership needs to step in to ensure that we understand and that we drive that adoption, and we emphasize the importance of what is data and data-driven decision-making. That's the starting point. But with that, to drive adoption, and more specifically to your question, I believe there are three, four elements that I will call out. First is education. I think the first point is that users must understand the process and the big picture, and be super sharp in the definition of what is the problem we are trying to solve. I see a lot of people stumbling when the problem is not clearly defined, and then we go all over the place, get a little bit frustrated. When the problem is sharply defined, I believe you can see the difference in how people go to the solutions and engage in the process. The second point is training. I think in the end, people need to understand that you mentioned that now they are used to do the work assisted by machines. You just mentioned that the machines will do the work guided by them. Then basically this means that they need to understand that platform, they need to understand that dynamic and the benefits of it, so they can navigate through the change, which is to bring a lot of their knowledge also for the machines to be able to do more of the work. Then the third point is experimentation. I think probably this is a critical one where I get a lot of questions. Experimentation means that senior leadership must provide the psychological safety for experimentation. I think probably you can teach me on this, but basically I'm reflecting a little bit on my experience that in the end, the digitization and the decision intelligence process, in essence, is an innovation and translation process from art and experience to machine work, the digital intelligence. And this is plenty, as any innovation or transformation process, it is plenty of failure, which is really learning while we get it right. And then basically the psychological safety that the senior leadership must create is to make sure that they give the space to people to experiment and to basically get the right decisions in the system until they get it right. And the final point is performance. People and business need to see the benefit of this intelligence that they are delivering. They need to see the benefit in the business, and they need to see the benefit in their own lives and own performance. Yeah. That's the way I believe it is the key to drive adoption, Fred.
No, that's fantastic. So if I recap what you said, you talked about education, you talked about training. Do you have any tricks on those first 2 points, things that have worked well for you at Unilever? Because I think people listening to this are like, okay, what is learned that you can share?
I think probably the key point when I mentioned on the on the first point related to education is that today you can see that you're doing the work and doing a lot of data and processes that you're following. Why I call education is because you need to help people to elevate their thinking, to understand the business problem, not the transaction to deal with the business problem, but also the business problem. If we don't do that transition, they will struggle to really start translating that intelligence in the way that they will be able to teach the machine.
Yeah.
That's the first point on education. It's a changing mindset to be business leader that can be translated in transaction. Then the training piece is to help how to translate that new business knowledge and new approach into a specific task, but the ones that the machine will be able to do. That's why the understanding the environment and the logic behind decision intelligence is important, even to engage and to speak the language.
And your third point, I think, is fascinating, right? The culture that allows you to, it's a very startup culture of fail fast. You try things and maybe it's not going to work right away, or it may not be relevant at all, because we're dealing here with a new topic, right? We're talking about digitizing decision making, which is not putting another software to replace an old version of the same thing. You're talking about changing the way work gets done. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about that, right? So how do you create that culture? How do you foster that culture of failing fast and enabling people to try things? I think that's fascinating when you think about the scale of a company like Unilever.
I think the first one, Fred, in my view, comes back to education, in this case of the senior leadership.
Yeah.
The first point is, again, is to accept that an innovation and transformation process is it needs to go through experimentation, and experimentation means failure for learning. That's an investment, okay? It's not failure, it's an investment. Then the second, once you create that mindset, the second point is, how do you define the size of failure so you can fail fast and you can fail cheap and learn a lot? Right? And then sometimes what people struggle with and the key concern is, oh, if I fail, I'm going to create a massive loss in the company. Well, I think the magic of senior leadership is to say, what is the environment, the freedom within a framework, and define that framework and give it to people and have their back when they don't get the result right. But the definition of leadership of that framework and what is an affordable loss in terms of money and time is what makes the clarity for people. So offering freedom within a framework that has been previously defined of the size of failure, in my view, is the magic that senior leadership must do.
I really like what you just said around it's not failing. If an initiative, few weeks invested in trying something doesn't work, it's not a failure. It's an opportunity to learn and take that knowledge and leverage it for the next one. I think it's fascinating. It applies actually way beyond what we're talking about today with decision intelligence. And your fourth point is actually a good segue to the next question, which is around value. Obviously, you're doing this to drive value. So you've had experience deploying decision intelligence across multiple areas of the organization. Maybe talk a little bit about some of the things you've done and examples, really tangible examples of the value and the benefits that it has generated for Unilever.
Well, let me divide my answer in two steps, Fred. Let's say the business outcomes and the in-process measures. Let me be more specific. I think I mentioned previously about the importance of defining clearly the problem we're trying to solve. Well, once that problem is clearly defined, for sure you will get that it's obvious that it will hit some very specific business metrics that are important, right? So I think the first point is to have that clarity and to define clearly the problem and the metrics that will be impacted with this that we're doing, so we can measure the impact continuously and see the improvement, because this will guide to the internal processes that are the ones that set the system to do that. So the first point is clarity on the business metrics and clearly measure it so people can see the benefit and the progress of what we're doing. I think the second point is one that in the past, I would recall some conversations that you and I have had in the past, and I've learned a lot as well in that process. if we see the key process indicator in this journey boils down to decisions acceptance. And basically, if the system is sending you recommendations, we educate and train the system. Progressively, this decision acceptance will increase. And that's a key point of the process indicator that are saying we are succeeding and the system is learning and people are being able to translate knowledge into decision intelligence. I think you know that by now. In some of our skills that we have been working together, we started with the concern that we were having less than 10% adoption, and today we exceed 2 million of decisions every year in finished goods planning, or getting to that mark with levels that now exceed the 65% of acceptance. To me, this is fascinating because this is something that probably, imagine the amount of decisions that we were not making. We weren't even conscious that we could have made those decisions to improve the system. So this is what we're seeing, this massive improvement. So that decision acceptance is the key point on a very specific, well-defined variable. And the third point to close is the coverage. Then what are the areas that we will go more problems clearly defined, more business metrics that we want to hit to deliver that? Those are the three ones. And then, of course, I have plenty of examples. I mentioned one, but basically I can tell you about the amount of cash. I mean, let's say only in South Africa, just with one skill, the skills norms to define the stocks level, we have released 6-7 million in only one country in cash. There are multiple examples that I can go on and on if we have time later, but basically the numbers are very tangible and we typically focus in service, in cost, in cash, but it's very, very tangible, the examples that we have.
So you're talking about measuring, obviously, acceptance, which is really critical. I think you also measure the level of automation. So what is the percentage of recommendation that are automatically accepted? You and I had multiple discussions on driving more and more automation. Once you get to a high level of acceptance for each skill, you can really try to trigger more and more automation, which is really interesting. Then you talked about measuring cash cost, service level, and other metrics. So there is so much to be discussed. Maybe it's another podcast on this one. But you've achieved tremendous results with decision intelligence. So I think with the time that we've got left today, I love to talk about what's next, right? So we talked a little bit about the past. You were early adopter. You went from, in some areas, low adoption to high adoptions, high volume, very clear metrics, very clear benefits. I'd love to hear more about the benefits as well. But where are you going now? So a lot of companies are maybe a bit behind in terms of their journey in decision intelligence. I think they look up to where you're going next. So talk about deploying decision intelligence across a broader range of skills. You talked about the scope a second ago. And I know you've talked publicly about a project called Sky, which is very inspiring. I'd love to hear a few comments on that as well, if it's possible.
Okay, no, thank you, Fred. I think I cannot hide my enthusiasm with what we are achieving. I think I see a clear difference. I mean, I'm talking about more than 500 bips in service improvement year on year in the area that we have sophisticated with a very robust base of systems and a lot of decision intelligence. So this is not a small number, and we are delivering also great results in overall reliability and in logistic costs. So I think based on that, we have a model that works, that is more than proven. And then to your specific question, what we're doing is dividing this in two pieces. We have a set of skills that we have developed with you and your team, in which are leading us, are helping us, a key enabler to deliver some of these results or a lot of these results that I'm mentioning. Overall, we have 12 of these very clearly defined skills that we are expanding globally. That's a first block. This is part of our long-term journey to implement the top 100 skills that we have defined in our master plan. But this block is expanding globally, aggressively through multiple regions to sophisticate our delivery, and we are seeing the tangible results. You will see publicly how are we growing the preference of our customers. But basically, the first big block, Fred, is to expand globally these proven skills that we have clear replicable models and that have been more than proven to deliver results. This is the finished goods norms skills, is the adjustment of purchase order, is the reduction of stock unproductive stocks, and I can continue on and on. But basically, those are basically growing quickly globally. First block. The second block is that we are seeing and the improvement in the base system, but also in the time of people to dedicate more time to creativity has led us to a growing process of innovation in the supply chain. And one of those examples, which is one that's very exciting, is this Sky project that we call it One Supply Chain. It's a radical customer connectivity project. And described in a very simple terms, basically, the project, the objective of the project is to connect seamlessly the data of our customers with our own data as a single seamless flow of information focused solely on the satisfaction of the consumers. So basically, we start with all the data from on-shelf availability. We bring all this data through a massive system. In this case, we have pilot this in Mexico, this system with Walmart, that basically they have agreed that we say this publicly. And I think we are delivering daily more than 3.2 million of SKU forecast combinations by a store daily. It's updated daily. So we are aligning on a forecast. We are delivering with that a perfected plan that is created by an AI engine that basically affects my production plan, my material supply plan, and builds perfect trucks to maximize the logistics incentives to Walmart. In a nutshell, that's the project. It's a customer connectivity to align on a single forecast that synchronizes our supply chains based on an AI engine. With this, our fill rates have increased significantly, meeting or exceeding the Walmart challenge that they put us with at the beginning of this project. So we're talking numbers of in excess of 98%. The on-shelf availability went up 98%. The forecast accuracy in excess of 80%. The effort reduction is exceeding the 30%. And in the end, the S&OP is becoming a touchless process, which was a dream for us, and now is becoming a tangible reality. I can continue on and on, but I believe you get a flavor.
But so you're talking about one model between your customer data and your data. You're talking about touchless. You're talking about but also the acceleration of the frequency, right? This is a model that refreshes on a daily basis, if I'm not mistaken, and that's right. Also quite revolutionary. So very interesting. You're capitalizing on the 12 skills. You're deploying them globally. You have a roadmap to go up to 100 skills for now. And in parallel, you're leveraging the technology and what you've learned over the years to actually really break through, a new way to collaborate intimately with your customers, which is fascinating, JC. We're going to run out of time in a couple of minutes. This conversation is really fascinating. But maybe we wrap up with me asking you what advice you would give to the folks listening to you today who are earlier in their stage in decision intelligence. We know that Gartner says by 2026, 75% of Global 500 will be deploying decision intelligence as a competitive differentiator. I think you guys have started that early, but maybe what would be the best advice you could share for those who are starting or are in the early stages of that journey?
I think, Fred, what comes to my mind is just to offer, what we have seen, what has been our experience. And I think the first point is as simple as get started. Yeah. I think we need to, and get started with one caveat, a super sharp, clear definition of the problem to solve. This is what would make that get started more exciting, and you will see the benefit faster. And I believe when we started this journey with you, maybe back in 2019, probably this, I'm putting this 4 or 5 years of learning. And I believe this is probably, we were gaining traction as we sharpen the definition of the problem. But the good thing is that we together had the courage to get started. I think that's the first point. And then the second point is, I think we discussed this before, but it's really, I'm just re-emphasizing it. this is an innovation and an experimentation process, and it's a people-first process. Then the only solution to do that, to make it real, is to create a psychological safety that the users, our employees, need to have the confidence to develop decision intelligence. Those would be my two points that I wanted to share.
Well, JC, we're right on time. I want to thank you both for your time today and sharing your experience, your expertise, what you've learned with the folks that are joining us at this event. And thank you first and foremost for the partnership. You mentioned 5 years. We've been working together for quite some time, learning, failing, starting again, and having fun along the way. So thank you very much for everything, JC, and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred. Always a pleasure to share our journey and on this exciting subject. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. That wraps up our fireside chat. Thank you very much.